Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining us tonight as we spend this next hour together. And I sincerely hope that you're safe and well and taking care of yourself and your family. By the way, to all of you dads out there, I hope you had a fantastic Father's Day weekend. Well, let me get right to it with my opening observations. Over the weekend, the President of the United States traveled to Tulsa, Oklahoma for that much talked about campaign rally. Well, only 6,200 people showed up in person, much to the president's dismay because he actually thought he would have a colossal crowd there. Now, to be fair, the RNC says some 11 million people watched the campaign rally online. We'll continue to follow the numbers to see how many people actually watched. In addition to that, the president did talk about coronavirus during his campaign rally. He stated that he told his staff to slow down the testing of the disease. Later on, his advisors basically stated the president was joking about that fact. Well, all jokes aside, in the real world, 120,000 Americans have died thus far from coronavirus. And to the family members who are still grieving for those 120,000 souls lost to this deadly coronavirus, there's no time for joking. This is serious and should be taken seriously by any leader who's involved in taking care of the American people as it relates to this pandemic. In addition to that, there's this new book that's out. Anybody hear about it? John Bolton writing a book, The Room Where It All Happened, which comes out tomorrow, by the way. And President Trump's former national security advisor says he believes the president should only be a one-term president, that he's not ready for another 4 years, and also stating that America itself is not ready for another 4 years of President Donald Trump. Adding the main purpose of his book is to lay out the facts, to let people read the book, and then make up their own mind about who they will vote for in November. Things are getting hot and heavy right now, and perhaps the president is feeling the heat. And those are my opening observations. My first guest to talk about all that's going on as it relates to the president and his former national security advisor, John Bolton, is Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver. She's a political analyst, and I'm so delighted that she can join me now with your perspective of this powerful interview that John Bolton had, and he made so many revelations. What did you think about all of this?
Oh my goodness. It's one of those things where you could have probably guessed a lot of this was true, but it was interesting seeing someone from the inside actually admit it. And if there were folks who really was wondering, is this person focused on the country or focused on internal concerns, just in terms of his own reelection or his own self-interest, I think that interview pretty much puts those guesses to rest.
And where does this put the election, obviously front and center, but where does it put the election when you have a conservative Republican like John Bolton, who stated that he's been a conservative since he was age 15, working for then Barry Goldwater, and then stating that he will not vote for Donald Trump, he'll write in a candidate. If people start thinking that way, where does that vote go? Does it somehow give Donald Trump an edge?
I'm not sure where that vote, because I've actually heard that he may even vote for Biden. The point is, he's not going to vote for Trump. And I think that it provides a space where you do have conservative Republicans who may have felt not at ease with what they've witnessed. It gives them a way to say, someone who is credible, someone who we know has been a Republican, actually for longer than Donald Trump has been a Republican, if you really want to get technical. Someone can say, then, yes, it makes sense that if he's coming out and being open about not supporting Trump, then we don't need to either.
From your Republican friends, what are they saying to you?
It's interesting because it varies. I have Republican friends who were from the very beginning never Trumpers, and they were like, I kind of expected this. This is why I'm a never Trumper. Then I have Republican friends who are very much in the Trump lane, so to speak. And for them, it's like no matter what will be revealed, they are going to stay loyal to Trump. And in fact, they are taking this opportunity to start the whole name calling thing around Bolton. But the reality is that this is someone who has, as you mentioned, credibility in the conservative space and has been there for years. And so it's really hard to believe at some point that when you have someone who ran on the fact that he can, bring the best people to the job, now be able to lean on the excuse that all these best people that he brought to the job are all somehow liars, or all somehow deficient in some way, all somehow have some other agenda. Either he is a horrible manager and leader and, CEO, which is supposed to be, was one of his main things for actually arguing that he should be president, or all these people who have left the administration, many saying very similar things, are telling the truth. And when you have a president who has been documented as having told over 15,000 lies himself, when I start to wonder who is being truthful, my first predisposition is to say whoever is saying something that's opposite of what President Trump is saying.
You're watching The Kelly Wright Show. We'll be back with more after this. Let me ask you something. In terms of the Black community, the Black and brown vote, because it's going to be very important this year, as it should be every year. This president has stated that he was the best president serving Black America since Abraham Lincoln. And some of his closest members have stepped back from that. And when I say closest members, I mean his aides who are African American, and they've stepped back from that, but yet they've touted some of the programs that he's done for HBCUs, for criminal justice reform. And now you put this against the backdrop of this book that John Bolton has coming out and all of the things that he is stating that has taken place. Where does this, where do you see this going in terms of Black America, for those Black Americans who have supported Donald Trump and voted for him, and for the vast majority of Black Americans who stayed at home in the last election? Will they stay at home this time?
I really believe, and at least I'm hopeful, that those who stayed at home last time will come to the polls and vote this time. And it's very important because honestly, even when you don't vote, you're voting.
Yes.
Like, basically what you're doing is you're allowing somebody else to make decisions for you. And I don't know about you, but I'm grown and I like to make my own decisions. Okay. And so I'm hoping that people go to the polls and vote, period. No matter who you're voting for, I hope they vote. Now, in terms of how that parses out, I do believe that there may be some people who supported Trump last time who are looking at how this COVID disaster was mismanaged, not to mention what he admitted to during his Tulsa speech, which, any of us could have predicted that, but he actually—
Talk to me about that. Please talk to me about that, because one, that was just, when I heard that, I about fell off my chair. And then not to mention the fact that he only had 6,200 people there when he anticipated thousands. Is that a sign that indicates that people are saying enough is enough? We're going to follow this and we're going to do something in November that may not sit well with this president?
Absolutely. I think what happened in Tulsa was, on the one hand, people are saying, even his supporters are saying, you ain't worth dying for, boo. Come on now. It's crazy. Now, we are in the middle of a pandemic. Are you nuts? I mean, there are going to be some who are apparently willing to risk their lives for him. But I think people that have more clear minds will not. That's one thing. Another thing is, it's very interesting to me, and a lot of attention is being played to what may have happened in terms of teenagers organizing against him, which I'm sure that they did. But the bottom line is, even with them doing that, it did not stop other people from coming if they wanted. Only about 6,000 people showed up when they thought that 1 million people were going to come. He was not expecting to come and present in front of an audience that was barely over half filled. And I think they need to sort of think about what's happening here with this electorate. People are getting exhausted from an administration that has shown over and over again, and once again, this goes back to what Bolton was saying, that he doesn't put at the top of his priority the American people. You know, he's willing to basically throw the dice when it comes to your life, just because he wanted to have an ego boost of having this rally. And when you think about that, and you think about everything else that has happened, including these, you know, really huge Bolton allegations, it just shows you time and time again that, you know, this is a personality that is not fit for office. And so I really do think that this may be a blowaway. The one thing that could make this close, and this is a big thing, and I think that everything is being lined up to make this real, is you're going to have a lot of actions in a lot of states across this nation that are specifically meant to compromise people's ability to vote. And so I think the strategy is going to be to just, you know, 10x voter suppression efforts with the hope that their constituencies can go out and vote, and those that they believe are going to vote against him will find it harder and harder to actually be able to cast their vote on election day or before in terms of absentee ballots.
Before I let you go, how much of an impact or how much of a factor will these protesters have in November? And I'm meaning white and black protesters who have been out day in, day out to try to get people to bridge this racial divide and actually do something in terms of police reform. How might they factor into November?
Absolutely. I think they're going to factor in a great deal because, as you've alluded to, this is Black-led, but it is a multiracial coalition of people who are out there on a day-to-day basis involved in this movement to highlight the importance of Black lives and the fact that they deserve to be protected and respected. And these are people who I really believe are going to make that transition from not just being in the streets, as important as that is, but also showing up at the polls in November to make their voices heard in that way too. We need both sides of the coin. We need external pressure in terms of the streets, but we also need pressure at the ballot box because ultimately they're both needed in order to create lasting change.
Yeah, Avis, we always call this the silly season when it gets close to an election, and certainly with all the things that we're up against, a COVID-19 pandemic, an epidemic of racism, the political divide that's larger and more wide, and then Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill not even seemingly coming together to do some of the things that need to be done for the American people. And then this president who is, we don't know what's going on now, especially with this John Bolton revelation. So it's going to be interesting to see. So I hope you'll be coming back to keep us informed from your political analysis on both sides of the issue, how Republicans are thinking, what Democrats are thinking, and even those independents who are out there kind of scratching their head saying, this is not good for the country. We've got to do something to change course.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure.
All right. Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, political analyst, great author too, by the way. What's the name of your latest book?
How Exceptional Black Women Lead.
I say that again.
Yeah, How Exceptional Black Women Lead.
I love that, how exceptional Black women lead. And we may, you never know, Joe Biden may pick a Black female as his running mate. We'll continue to follow the developments of that. But appreciate having you on. All right, we're back with more after this. See ya. Welcome back to the program. So as many of you know, the coronavirus continues to spread and there's a surge in it since many states have been reopening. And as we talked about last week, one of those states that has been adversely impacted due to the coronavirus is Florida. And Dr. Reynald Lamar joins us again. He's a hospitalist there operating in Orlando, Florida. And Doc, it keeps surging. What can Florida do to mitigate the growth or the spread of this virus, I should say?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kelly. I think what we can do as a state is kind of follow suit with some of the other states that have made it mandatory to wear masks whenever you're leaving your place of residence. Uh, Studies have shown that wearing masks greatly reduces the risk of transmission, and it has not yet been mandated that you have to wear a mask when you go out in public. There are certain counties that have made this mandate, including Orange County, where I currently practice. But there are many, many other counties that have not made it necessary or made it mandatory to wear a mask in public.
Doc, here's something I don't understand. I mean, I see a lot of people not wearing masks, and it's almost as if they're in defiance of the facts and the science. And then there's this myth that's circulating out there that somehow wearing a mask would be harmful to you. Is that true?
Wearing masks is not harmful at all. In fact, it's beneficial not only to you, but to your loved ones and families. What I've seen here is that people don't wear the mask until coronavirus affects them in some way, whether it's a family member getting affected or a friend getting infected. That's when they are like, oh, okay, maybe I should wear the mask. But wearing a mask, there's no harm that can come.
Yeah, no harm. And then you're in an area that, you know, quite frequently has a lot of tourists, albeit that Disney is planning to reopen with the NBA playing there. We know that sports teams are now worried about the fact that coronavirus continues to spread. And now the NBA is even looking at, or at least some of the players are looking at themselves saying, is this really a risk worth taking, since some of them have been testing positive coronavirus, as well as the NFL, Major League Baseball. It just seems that this reopening phase, which we all realize we have to do in order to get our economy reignited, but at what cost if we don't pay attention to doctors like yourself on the front lines?
Yeah, that's a major concern of mine as well. With the reopening of Universal Studios, Disney World, SeaWorld, is you don't have to, for those locations, you have to wear masks to gain entry into the theme parks. But when they're not at the theme park, when they're at restaurants, when they're walking around the streets, they're not being required to wear masks. So that's a major concern that I have as well. And I think the concerns of the NBA players are valid.
I visited a beach area over the weekend, and I was surprised to see how many people were without masks. And then I was also pleasantly encouraged when I saw people still following social distancing guidelines, and particularly in the restaurants. And it was Virginia Beach, as well as Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. And of course, North Carolina has a huge surge, yet I saw people paying attention and being proactive. Isn't wearing a mask and safeguarding yourself and washing your hands and following good hygiene, isn't that really to protect yourself as well as others?
Yes, it is. It goes back to what we learned as kids: wash your hands and don't touch your face and don't put things in your mouth. I think wearing a mask and practicing social distancing is the best that we can do to help reduce the transmission of the virus.
Final question. You're out there on the front lines. I know that your workload has increased since the surge of coronavirus there in Florida. What's it like on the front lines? What are you encountering in terms of patients?
Mm-hmm. So yes, we have seen a pretty big surge. I think we had a record over 5,000 new confirmed cases over the last day or two. Since I've last been on the show, every day it's been slowly increasing. Pretty rapidly. What we're seeing now is primarily younger people are being affected, anywhere from 20 to about 35. They're not coming in as sick as they were previously, but the numbers are steadily rising. And a lot of them are asymptomatic, where we're catching them because they're coming in for procedures. So we're doing pre-procedure checking and finding that they're positive.
Yeah, and of course that's important because then you can treat them and help them. But the threat still remains that those younger people contracting the coronavirus or walking around asymptomatic can pass it on to their older loved ones, and therein lies a problem, right?
And yes, that is correct. And therein lies the problem. That's why I can't stress enough the importance of wearing a mask when you go out and socially distancing, not just for yourself, but to protect other people as well.
Dr. Renaud Lamar joining us tonight, and we thank you, sir, for the work that you're doing there in the front lines with the COVID-19 pandemic. Appreciate you. Keep us updated.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to a very special part of the program, and that is strengthening the family. And joining me now are George and Tondra Gregory. Wonderful couple they are, the founders of Journey for Life, as well as serve in the capacity as NFL chaplains to the Los Angeles Chargers, which a lot of people have their eye on right now for other reasons. We'll get into that later, right? But right now, let's talk about strengthening the family. One of the things that we see, George and Tondra, in this day and age, with the conflict that has been going on racially, with the conflict that we have dealing with the coronavirus and its impact on the African-American community and on families globally, but of course here in the United States, it's hit Black and brown communities quite hard. But we see rising out of all of this, anger. Mm-hmm. How do we manage our anger in the home so that we all get along, stay sane, and stay safe?
Yes. Anger is nothing bad about being angry, right? Like the Bible does say it's okay to be angry. It's how you handle your anger that is most important. So we need to make sure we channel our anger into positive ways that have positive impacts and not be destructive with our anger. So a big part of handling your anger is kind of removing yourself enough from your emotions to figure out, because a lot of times people feel like they're angry, but it could be another emotion underneath, right? So you have to figure out what your triggers are, because you could just be hurt. You could be in pain. You could be sad. You could be tired. You could be overwhelmed. It's just that anger is the most common emotion that most people feel, right? They feel more empowered if they're angry versus feel very vulnerable if they are sad or overwhelmed. So yeah, anger is something that we all feel, but handling it appropriately is the key.
George, your wife, Tondra, is right. Handling it appropriately is the key. But anger has spilled over not only from our homes, but also into the streets in terms of the protest over various things that have happened to Black men and women recently. And we see this anger, seething anger. And while some people would like to point to riots and looting, there's also this righteous indignation that's expressed through peaceful protests to get something done. And that's to get people to the table to actually talk about our differences, painful as it might be, but to talk about it. Is that the best way to also deal with anger in the home?
Well, if you don't talk about why you're angry, you're never going to solve or get to the root of the solution, right? We tell people all the time, the reason why we communicate, the goal is to be heard, not just to say things, right? So it matters how we say things, it matters what we say, and it matters that we're honoring one another. And so when we look at what's happening in the streets, it's no different than what we would say as a couple, you should try to resolve conflict in a way. And there's, unfortunately, many people don't know how to advocate for themselves. They don't know how to articulate what's going wrong without sounding in a wrong tone or in an angry way. And so we have to learn to sometimes back away from the situation, articulate our thoughts. Why are we angry? What are we wanting to see different? And what are we willing to bring to the table in order to accomplish that? Many times we only put that on the other person to they should not, they should just know.
Mm-hmm.
No, they don't know. We have to clearly articulate that. And there's always two sides to every story. And so we've got to be willing to come to that table to say, how do we resolve this together? And I think, you know, from what I see there's a lot of protest. And yet I do see that across America, there's more than just African Americans that are responding to this. And that gives me hope that it's not just our plight, it's humanity's plight, that we fight this injustice together.
Yeah.
Thank you both, George and Tondra Gregory. They'll be back here again Wednesday, so make sure you keep on watching them as we strive to keep strengthening the family. And certainly one of the things we do have to deal with in the family is anger. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
We'll be back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So joining me now is a good friend, Kathleen Triggs. She is a highly sought after motivational speaker and MC for events and fundraising galas around. And in addition to that, she's a Emmy Award winning journalist. She's worked at a couple of the stations and a couple of the markets that we worked in together. One being Channel 9 News there at WWR TV in the New York area. She also worked at the Fox 5 affiliate there in New York City. And we also worked opposite stations there in the Norfolk, Virginia area. But more importantly, she is just a fantastic human being who's doing some great things. And I'm going to have her tell you more about it, because the list of things and accomplishments and contributions that Kathleen is making is just astounding. So Kathleen, welcome to the program. And can I start this off by saying how proud I am of you?
Wow. You know what, Kelly, it goes right back at you. And certainly I accept. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me as well. And congratulations to you. What is that quote? Service is the rent that we pay, right? For being here on this earth. And I learned that at a young age. My mother is in her 80s. And to this day, pre-COVID shutdown, she for 30 something years has gone to the nursing home in our community in Dover, Delaware, and played hymns for the nursing residents that can't get out to go to church. And so after she plays for her own church service, she goes there and just spends time with them. You know, some of them have no visitors, and she's been doing this for 30 something years. And so, and she also takes care of them, washes their hair, sends things to them, picks up, you know, she's just amazing. She's an amazing servant. And so I learned from the best.
You did, and she has an amazing daughter. You have a television show of your own. Tell us about your show and how it's reaching out to impact. I know a lot of women, but you also impact a lot of men, because I'm sure a lot of men are peeping in on your show to see what the women are up to.
Yeah. So there's a few shows that I've produced, and there's kind of a theme. I really do love uplifting our people, you know, that being women, minorities, people who are disadvantaged or discriminated against, you know, over and over and over again. We've all seen it as a Black female, as a business owner, as a news anchor, a former news anchor, and as a content creator and a entrepreneur and a producer. Like, I have seen it all. I've seen it all when it comes to the difference, you know, the separate and not equal. So I've really tried to create shows that empower us, empower women, empower minorities to be able to tell our stories through our own lens, and also uplift us. I'm not downing anyone else who, you know, likes to create content that may not be the most uplifting to our people. But for me in particular, I chose to try to focus on the positive. And I wanted to really show all the amazing gifts that we do have. So I just created a show called the iWoman Report that I've been doing. And the iWoman Report is a news program and an entertainment program. And what I'm doing is bringing current events to a digital screen and breaking it down in a way that I think is palatable and understandable, and also entertaining at the same time.
You know, we share a lot of the same philosophy, especially when it comes to uplifting people and providing them with not only information and entertainment, but inspiration. Because inspiration is where we find our fuel, if you will, to achieve the things that we aspire to do. And a lot of that comes from faith.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it comes from spreading good news in what I like to say in a bad news world.
You're
And
so
you're
right.
doing that.
You're so right. And it's an uphill battle because not everyone wants to hear good news. Let's face it, bad news is the reason that, news people have a job. So, we make our living often by telling, usually I always used to say when I was a reporter, when I knock on someone's door, it's usually because it's the worst day of their life, right? And I'm not coming because, it's your birthday. If a reporter or a news person is coming to your door, it's because someone was shot or killed, or there was a fire, or you're being arrested. Some bad news usually. And I'm glad to see you really trying to change that and tell some of the good stories. It's difficult in this climate, though, because there's so much that's going on, particularly right now. We're in such an unusual, scary time. And so it's a little difficult sometimes to pull out those flowers in the flower bed, but you still have to find them.
Talk to me about how this COVID-19 pandemic, this new normal, and the frustration that we experience, as well as the heartbreak that we experience as African Americans dealing with the racial climate of today.
Oh, Kelly, I could go on and on and on. We don't even have enough time. Let's start with COVID, the coronavirus. My husband is a doctor, and we both are entrepreneurs. He runs a plastic surgery practice in 9 cities, and so he's been completely shut down. He's just reopening now. And for me, I own a production company. I have a studio in Midtown Manhattan. I had to furlough my employees, but we bounced right back, and we were able to create a work-home environment that has worked for us. So I feel like there are people who lose during this time, and there are people who win during this time. And really, you have to make a decision. Which side of that pendulum do you want to be on? In my case, I decided to jump into action and figure out how we can be even more productive in this environment that's really unpredictable. So that's how the iWoman Report came to be. I didn't know that I was onto something, but it's become really popular, and I'm loving it. So I'm enjoying actually having this time. My kids are getting older. They're 16 and 18. So my son just graduated from high school, and it's been a really rough time for him because they've missed out on so much, right? But I've been blessed to be able to spend these months at home with them and making it through during this time. So I see it as a blessing. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
That's so true. Before we take a break, I want to talk to you about the racial climate that we're confronted with. We've seen people protesting all around the world in the wake of George Floyd. We know that this is a problem that's been plaguing our nation for years, and we have to address it. And one of the things that I'm finding is that a lot of people now, white and black, are willing to have this dialogue. But beyond the dialogue, Kathleen, we have to have programs that will say to the people, in your dialogue, make sure that you engage in proactivity to actively care for each other and right the wrongs of our past, correct the present so that we can build a better future. How does Kathleen Trigg do that as the mother of African-American children, as an entrepreneur, as a woman of color, and as someone who's always seeking to elevate the conversation so that you can lift up not only Black lives that truly matter, but all lives?
I have always been in the business of service first and foremost. Raising an African-American son in particular, I have to admit, I am scared to death. It's hard for me to sleep at night because I'm so worried. And I don't want, fear. Sometimes you can be too fearful and then you end up making things happen that shouldn't. But this climate is really concerning to me, and I had no choice but to jump into action and really do everything I can from a standpoint of being a producer and being able to share the truth, first of all, because I think it all begins with the truth that we're getting out to the public, really encouraging people to take action by exercising your right to vote. Let's start right there. Get out and vote. If you have not registered yet, register today to vote. because all of the protesting, all of the rioting, all of this talking, Black Lives Matter and everything will be right here in the same conversation post-November, and I fear it will be even worse if we do not get out in masses and exercise our right to vote.
Well said. I'm talking to Kathleen Trigg. When we come back, we'll talk more about her foundation. And in particular, as she just mentioned, the Trigg House. You will be fascinated to see what that wonderful program is doing. Back with more of Kathleen Trigg after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking to Kathleen Trigg, and for those of you who have followed her, you know that she is a woman who is always putting it together. She puts her best work on display, and her best work on display is something that is inspirational and encouraging and motivating. Kathleen, you have a foundation. Talk to me about the Trigg House and how that came into being.
Sure. Well, it goes back to how I came into being, to be honest. I was a foster child, and I started out in an orphanage. I was dropped off at an orphanage shortly after I was born, and I remained in that orphanage and then went into foster care and eventually was adopted. And when I was adopted, it became my fifth home that I'd been shifted in between by the age of 2. So I'm a very emotionally driven person when it comes to people who are disadvantaged and come from disadvantaged circumstances, because I always feel like it could have, and sometimes I even think should have been me. So I always feel like I have a greater purpose. There must be a reason that my life was spared. There must be a reason that I'm even here talking to you today. And I take that that responsibility very seriously. So I have started a foundation called Trigg House back in 2008. And the idea behind Trigg House was, I don't know what would have happened to me if I had stayed in the foster care system. I don't believe I'd be where I am today, though. And so what I wanted to do was create this foundation that bridges the gap between being a foster child who never gets adopted and being emancipated and basically given your papers and told you're now free to go out and live your life with no resources, no foundation, no backing, no family, no nothing. And I didn't want those children to continue to fall through the cracks. So I started the Trigg House as a bridge to try to one, give these children some hope and encouragement that, hey, I was one of you. And if I can do this, I'm not saying everyone, it's just that easy, but the bottom line is if you see someone who looks like you and came from where you came from, just maybe you can dream bigger than you might dream without that. And that was the idea. These kids who don't get adopted the statistics are really grim. They do end up oftentimes incarcerated or unwanted teenage pregnancies or sometimes dead or on drugs. And I just didn't want that to happen. So I'm just trying to do my part, the little part that I can to make a difference.
You know, that's very impactful because it is making a difference in the lives of so many that you touch. The other alternative is if they don't get the kind of help, they can fall into those traps, like you mentioned, or even human trafficking.
Right.
Tell me, if you will, some of the stories that have empowered you to keep it on with this wonderful foundation to help these children.
There's so many, and that's one of them right there. Trafficking. So many young girls end up in trafficking situations because they just don't have a family. They don't have anyone who really cares. So a man, often it's a male, comes along and promises them the world. Sometimes it becomes their boyfriend or their sugar daddy, and they end up in a situation that they can't get out of. I've heard so many, in fact, we don't have a ton of time, but I did go on a journey myself this past year to uncover my own roots. I produced a show called We Are the Joneses, and it's about my family, my husband and I, and his medical practice and my production company, and how we work together as a Black couple, trying to support one another and building our businesses. And in the second season, which is coming out in the fall, I went on this journey to find out where I came from. And one of the things I learned is that my mother, when she was thinking about giving me up for adoption, she actually let me go live with an uncle of hers who was a pastor with 6 sons, and they wanted a little girl to complete their family. And what's so fascinating or sad or scary is that this pastor molested my mother from the time she was 7 years old. And he took me home with his family and was going to raise me. And at some point, she just decided that she couldn't do that. So she went back and took me from him and put me up for adoption. So, I mean, that to me is a near miss. But how many children get stuck in that situation and no one comes back to rescue them? I didn't get to meet my mother. She actually committed suicide. But that story to me, I feel like, wow, how close was my life to ending potentially or going down a really tragic path. So I feel really indebted. I do. I feel like I'm here to make a difference and to save as many kids as I can from a life that could be a really bad situation.
Kathleen, thank you. You are a breath of fresh air in a sea of in a sea of troubled waters. And I think it's important that we hear conversations from the heart. And that's what you've been able to impart to us today on this program. You have to do me one favor, that is, you have to come back to keep keep on putting that positivity out there.
Yeah, if I can get you on the iWoman Report, you can have me back anytime you want me on the Kelly Wright Show.
It's an even exchange, and I'll tell you why it's an even exchange, because we as African Americans, and when we've accomplished some things in our lives, we should not hold on to it, but we need to let it go. We need to share it with those who are our contemporaries and those who will come behind us, so that we establish a legacy of hope. I like to call it posturing faith. And you can talk about it, but until you posture it and mold it and shape it and live it and give it, no one can really receive it. And so I thank you for what you're doing. And I hope that I can encourage you in some way, just as you've encouraged me and so many people who will watch this. I end my show every day by saying, I hope that you will spread love, freedom, and peace. And you just dropped all of that on us here today, Kathleen Trigg. So thank you for being on the Kelly Wright Show.
Thank you for having me.
And how can we find you? Before we go, how can we watch your program? Where can we get in touch with you?
Yep, you can find me at our website, iWoman.tv or iWomanTV.com.
We'll be doing some things together, no doubt, musically and spiritually, and just doing things in television. Kathleen Trigg, guest on my show, a friend to the show, always welcome here. And just thanks again. Make sure you check out Kathleen Trigg. Back with more after this. Welcome back. I want to thank everyone who appeared on tonight's program, and I want to thank you for watching us. Your time to me is very valuable. And now my final word is merely this. Hopefully we've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
Just give it time. Keep on marching on. Keep on being strong.